Welcome back. Today, we've got an absolutely critical explainer lined up for you. We're going to completely demystify the somewhat chaotic world of global shipping contracts. And we're doing it by zooming in on something that looks incredibly small, but trust me, carries a massive financial punch.
Let's start with a section I call the 50 lakh rupee mistake, the costly consequence of 3 tiny letters. Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture this. A massive cargo ship is carrying 50 lakh rupees worth of factory machinery. Out of nowhere, a massive storm hits, and that ship sinks straight to the bottom of the ocean. Naturally, the buyer who bought that machinery immediately calls up the vendor, right? They demand a full refund for their lost goods. But guess what? They get nothing, absolutely zero.
The vendor didn't even argue. They literally just pointed to 3 tiny letters printed on the contract. FOB. Just because of those 3 letters, the buyer lost all 50 lakhs. They had absolutely no legal right to complain. So how on earth does that happen? Well, it happened because the buyers simply didn't understand Incoterms. And honestly, this is a devastating mistake that happens every single day.
So let's break it down. In simple words, Incoterms, which stands for International Commercial Terms, are these universal 3-letter codes, and they basically do 3 very specific things. They define exactly who pays the shipping costs, who pays for the insurance, and, this is the big one, the exact physical moment the risk of loss transfers from the seller to the buyer. This whole concept is really about pinpointing exactly when a disaster stops being the vendor's fault and instantly becomes your problem.
Let's quickly run through the 4 major codes you're definitely going to encounter. First up is EXW, or X-Works. This means the buyer does practically everything. You literally have to go and pick the goods up directly from the vendor's factory floor. Then we have FOB, free on board. Here, the seller loads the goods onto the ship at their local port, but the very second that box crosses the ship's rail, boom, it's the buyer's problem. Next is CIF, cost insurance and freight. This is where the seller pays for the ocean shipping and the transit insurance to get the goods to your local port. And finally, DAP, delivered at place. In this scenario, the seller does almost everything, dropping the goods right at your factory door. You just pay the import taxes. So you can see how these codes really dictate the sliding scale of responsibility.
Moving on to our next section, the TV delivery analogy. We're bringing global shipping right into your living room.
And this brilliantly illustrates how these somewhat intimidating international terms actually apply to everyday life. Think about buying a massive, expensive flat-screen TV. EXW is the exact equivalent of carrying that giant TV out of the store yourself. If you trip in the parking lot and that brand new screen shatters on the pavement, that is your total loss. The store owes you absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, DAP is exactly like paying for premium home delivery. The store drives it to your house, safely puts it in your living room. If their delivery truck crashes on the highway along the way, the store absorbs that loss and owes you a brand new TV. Make sense?
All right, let's look at a real-world workplace example. RIA Steel Import Dilemma, XYZ Limited's administrative nightmare versus a simplified supply chain. So RIA works for XYZ Limited, and she's importing a huge shipment of steel from Europe. If she signs an EXW contract, she is staring down an absolute mountain of work. Step 1, she's got to figure out how to hire European trucks. Step 2, she has to navigate foreign export customs entirely on her own. And step 3, she has to book the ocean ship herself. It is an exhausting, multi-step administrative nightmare that is just going to eat up all of her time. But watch what happens if she simply changes that contract to CIF. Under the CIF solution, her supply chain is vastly simplified. Step 1, the European vendor handles all their own local transport. Step 2, the vendor pays the ocean freight and buys the marine insurance. The ship just sails right to Mumbai. RIA only steps in at Step 3, taking over responsibility once the steel safely arrives at the Mumbai port. By making transport and insurance the vendor's responsibility, she completely streamlines her workload. A total game changer.
Now for the confusion buster. Cost versus risk. Breaking down the ultimate beginner's trap. Now, what's really interesting here is how beginners constantly confuse paying for the shipping with actually owning the risk. The cost is simply a matter of who pays the freight company's invoice. The risk, on the other hand, is entirely different. It's all about who takes the financial hit if that truck catches on fire. You can pay for the cost without holding the risk and vice versa.
Which perfectly explains what we call the CIF trap. In a CIF contract, the seller pays for the freight, but, and this is a massive but, The risk actually transfers to the buyer the precise moment the goods are loaded onto the ship in that foreign country. So if that ship sinks halfway across the ocean, it's the buyer who holds the risk and has to go claim the insurance, not the seller. Mind-blowing, right?
Let's view this through an auditor's eye. The double insurance trap, an agile auditor's eye on massive operational waste.
This phrase right here, double insurance, is the ultimate auditor's red flag. You absolutely need to watch out for this because it represents a massive hidden drain on operational funds. And finance teams miss it all the time, simply because they aren't coordinating with procurement on these specific terms.
Let's break down exactly how this crazy, costly overlap happens. First, the buyer negotiates a CIF contract. Now, remember what we just learned? That means the vendor has already purchased and priced the transit insurance into the deal. But then, the buyer's finance team, who isn't communicating about the specific Incoterms being used, accidentally adds that exact same shipment to the company's own blanket marine insurance policy. The result? The company is literally paying two completely different insurance companies to protect the exact same voyage. It's a total waste of money, born purely from a lack of communication.
So, the crucial point we need to take away is this. Incoterms draw the exact legal line between the vendor's problem and your problem. They aren't just polite shipping suggestions, they are ironclad financial boundaries.
I want to leave you with this final provocative question to chew on. Which three letters are currently hiding in your contracts, and are they secretly exposing you to double insurance or worse, total financial ruin? I highly recommend checking your paperwork the second this explainer is over. Thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to guide you through our next analysis.